All right, we are recording again.
All right, welcome everybody to Parks and Waterfront for the month of June. I don't know what today is. It's Thursday. I guess it is. We're going to take things just a little differently for this meeting. We're going to try and save a little time. I know it's difficult because we have a packed agenda, but we've had a packed agenda in parks for the last few years, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. But first, although we don't need to vote on the minutes, we're going to use that for attendance. So I need for committee members to, or for someone to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Trevor, we technically don't need a motion to approve the minutes. We can just vote on them with a roll call vote.
So we're going to roll call vote on the minutes. I don't have a list of people. Michael, do you have the list?
I don't, but I can wing it. Yaron Altman. Yaron Altman. David Adams. Ryan Gilliam.
Yes.
Ryan, hold on. You're taking the attendance now? Sorry to put you in this position.
I was trying to, but I don't have the list either of the people, so.
Right. So, all right, let me do this real quick. So Yaron's not here, right?
Yaron's not here. Dave Adams is not here.
Okay. Go ahead.
Michael, we should.
Carolyn.
What? Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Carlin Chan.
I'm here.
Thank you. Valentina Jones.
I'm here.
Thank you. Josie Velez. Josie.
Here.
Kay Webster.
Here.
Trevor Holland.
Here.
Michael Marino, here. Did I forget anybody?
Robin?
Oh, Robin Chattel. Robin. Nope.
Did you call Carolyn?
Yes, I did. All right, that seems to be everybody.
All right, we're going to take make a slight change in our agenda. We're going to move the fire department agenda item to number 2. So if you want to put that up on the screen. Michael, are you putting it on the screen or fire department?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, it takes a minute. Ah, that's weird. Hold on. Just going to do it this way because for some reason my computer doesn't like to show the PowerPoint. You know what? I'm going to stop this and I'm going to do the PDF that they sent me. Hold on one second. Okay.
Okay, Michael, is this a good time to start talking?
Yes, thank you, Scott.
Outstanding. Thank you, everybody, for having us. I'm Scott with Cameron Engineering, representing the Fire Department of New York. Irma Fontaine is on the phone. And we'll be talking about the recommended proposed improvements to EMS Station number 4, located where Clinton Street dead ends into the FDR, and between the elevated highway and the East River. You can go to the next slide, show the location, which is to say that it's right on the East River. You can keep going until we get to the first rendering, I believe.
This one or the next one?
This is fine. The important thing about this building is that it is really in the shadow of the FDR. And even when you're on the bike path, you seldom take notice of what's happening at Pier 36. In addition to the fire department building, there is a police building, Department of Sanitation, and a facility known as Basketball City. So we can keep going now. So in Hurricane Sandy, EMS 4, being on the river, was inundated, completely inundated. 5 feet of water entered the building and made it completely unusable. In that were the emergency generator that was located at grade, the boiler, all electrical equipment, phone and IT was all ruined. And this is a major EMS station for the neighborhood and for the city at large. In fact, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Manhattan Borough for EMS services is located on the 2nd floor. So very important that this building remain functional in a flood event. And what we are proposing is to do some internal improvements to raise the necessary functions above the flood elevation. And we are moving from inside the building to an exterior platform, the electrical equipment, the boiler, and IT equipment. Additionally, the same platform will be used to elevate the generator so that it remains above the flood level at all times. So we can go to the next slide now. This is a rendering of what the building is going to look like from all sides. The middle image is basically what you see if you're walking by it, and I'm sorry, the lowest image is what you would see as if you're walking on the bike path and look towards the East River. That's the building you see now, with the exception of the platform on the right of the building. What's there now is the emergency generator at grade. So if you go to the next slide, this is the platform. The first level is a container that will contain the boiler, the electrical panels, which, by the way, the electrical serves all the buildings on this site, not just the EMS station. And it will also include the IT information and closet. Above that is the emergency generator. The other improvements to the site are merely repairing sandy damage and keeping the building itself fully functional. So we can go to the next slide now. We can refer to this if necessary, but this is just showing you the different perspective of a series of photos that we can get into now. So next slide, please. The photo on the left, you can barely see it. This is taken from the FDR heading north. You can just see the top of the brick building. And then if you're on the NYC ferry and looking back towards the neighborhood, you can't even see the building. That's the image on the right. All that you can see is the Department of Sanitation building, because it's between that building and the FDR that our EMS station is located. Next slide, please. The slide on the left shows you what you're seeing when you're heading north on South Street / FDR. And you can kind of make out a little area hatched out in red, which is roughly where the platform for the generator and mechanical equipment would be shown. And a similar view on the right side of the frame is looking straight at the building. And again, the area in red is about where the new platform is going to be located. Next slide, please. This is the rear of the building. It's not very consequential, never be seen from any perspective. It's only shown here to note that we are closing that overhead door and bricking it in. The slide on the right shows the north side of the building, and this will remain generally as it is, except the cladding that you see there, the metal, will be painted red, which is a symbol of the fire department. Next slide. And that's the side of the building that's facing the FDR, facing the neighborhood. The slide on the right is showing the rooftop. So it's really only the buildings facing the water that could ever see the rooftop of the building, and cars passing on the FDR, but this is really the last thing they'd notice. Next slide. And if we ever have to get into the weeds here, we can look at the architectural plans, but that's really the substance of the building. All of these improvements are required by code to elevate the essential functions of the building. And again, it is an absolutely essential facility to the city and to the neighborhood for ambulances and medical personnel. The changes are very modest. They're absolutely required, and this has no effect on street parking, on views of the river, etc. So I would like to open this up to questions.
Trevor?
Yeah, I'm going to remind everyone, and I sent it in the chat, that this presentation was also, or still available on the CDP website. I have some general questions, and I want a show of hands. This is odd to do it this way, but a show of hands from committee members who also have questions. I'm just going to go as quick as I see them. So I see Val. So Val, you can go ahead and ask your question.
What I don't understand is it looks like it's outside. And so my question is, I understand wanting to get it up, because I remember Bellevue had to close during Sandy because a lot of their equipment and central supply, et cetera, is downstairs in the basement. But I don't quite understand, that this is outside. And my question basically is, is that the best place in terms of dealing with bad weather, to have essential equipment outside to deal with the weather? Or how do you deal with the weather?
That's a very good question. And ideally, you would keep this inside the building, but that's not an option. Everywhere inside the building is below the flood level. At least that is to say, everywhere that we could put this kind of equipment is below the flood level. So keeping it outside, it's not a risk to the equipment itself because the generator is already outside. And we are putting the boiler, electrical room, and IT room in a prefabricated enclosure. It's basically like a train car that is insulated, weatherproof, and is going to be completely secure. So for being susceptible to the elements, it's not. It's very durable. And it's also, what the main advantage of having it outside the building is that in the event of a storm, if somebody needs to access it, and if the building is being flooded, they can access this platform much easier. So it's best for the building, and there's no security concerns either because it's all within a secure site, and the containment facility itself is well secured and insulated.
Okay, thank you. I like the idea that it's insulated. That kind of answers my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Carolyn. Carolyn, you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Fine. How high is the platform?
The platform will be from the railing to grade will be 26 feet tall. It's lower than the height of the existing building.
Right, but how far is the container that holds all the equipment off the ground?
Container is 10 feet above grade. And the way that was calculated is that there is a base flood level, which is 7 feet above the pavement. And then to that, you have to add 2 feet to get to where you are allowed to begin installing the structural system that will support anything. So on top of that structural system, which is about a foot thick, that goes the mechanical platform. This is all governed by FEMA requirements, and we kept it as low to the ground as we could, but that still puts it 10 feet up in the air.
Okay. That I noticed that a lot of the buildings now are putting the mechanicals on top of the building. And I was just curious as to why you opted to do a platform rather than putting it on top of the building.
Also an excellent question, and frankly, to put it on top of the building would have been, that was our first instinct to do so, but the building itself is not built for the kinds of loads that it would take to install a boiler, electrical, and generator on the roof. You can see the roof there. There is some mechanical equipment, but nowhere near as heavy or as dynamic as the equipment that's going to be going in the platform. It's only because of the existing structural condition of the roof itself that could not be changed that we put it outside the building.
Okay. All right, answered my question.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I noticed there's parking there that would be filled in with some of what you're doing, and wondering where do you anticipate that parking will wind up going?
I'm happy to answer that. Can we go to the last slide in this PDF here?
That's the last slide.
Yes, there you go. Okay. So yes, you're absolutely right. There are 3 parking spaces being taken over by the platform. The platform is open, so there will be so there may be a way to park underneath it, but in case that can't happen, you can see on the right side of the screen here, there are 3 rectangles up against what's a chain link fence on the right side of the site. That area is available for parking of vehicles for the personnel using the facility. So not only are we relocating 3 existing spaces that are being lost, but the 2 spaces that remain, which are shown below the platform on the left side of the screen, those are being made accessible. So now wheelchair access is available to the building. So you lose no parking, and you really improve the parking situation at the site.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Any other committee members? Okay, some questions for you. I mean, I live about 100 feet away from this building, and to be honest, I never really noticed it. I actually didn't even know it was in front of Pier 36 or the sanitation building. I just thought it was a part of it. But I do have some questions, just some issues that we experienced here with Pier 36 and the Waterfront South. There is a traffic signal which governs the traffic going in and out one of your entrances. Is that going to be affected, and are you going to install a second one at the second entrance?
Good question. We are not changing vehicular ingress or egress to the site. So no, as part of this project, we are not touching that intersection or the traffic signals.
You said that there's the electrical there serves all of the buildings. Is that your fire department buildings or all of the buildings on 36?
All the buildings on 36. We were kind of surprised to find that that was the case, but indeed the point of entry to the whole Pier 36 comes in through this building. So that's why it's crucial that this be elevated above the flood level. So the electrical system comes in, and from the panels there, it is distributed throughout to the police building, to sanitation, and to Basketball City.
And because obviously during Sandy, the building was inundated, as you mentioned. It looks like 36 will continue to be inundated, and your firehouse will also be, the mechanicals will be protected. But in light of the fact that there's not much you can do except raise the electrical, because the building will still be impacted. Are you also looking to make the building have a wet footprint, or is it just going to flood again as it did during Sandy?
These are amazing questions, seriously. The building is being redesigned to have flood vents installed at grade, which mean that it allows flood waters to come into the building and back out. Some buildings will crumble when floodwaters stack up around the structure. In this case, what we're doing is we're actually enabling floodwaters when they rise to come into the first floor and pass out. So the structure remains unaffected. But inside the building, we are expanding an existing mezzanine that's halfway between the first and second floors. That mezzanine will have the kitchen and all offices that are currently on the first floor, and that's above the flood level. So the facility itself will still be operable even in a flood situation, and even as water is passing through the first floor. The mezzanine and the second floor will be constantly in service.
But during an emergency, the staff and personnel would still have to evacuate the building, and it's a handy type event.
If they had to evacuate the building, the FDNY would have to respond to that in a way that they would have to respond to any building that's being evacuated. But we're securing the structure of the building by installing the flood vents, and there should be no reason for it to evacuate because of the flood. Now, if there are other reasons, fire, it's a sprinklered building, so that shouldn't be a problem. And if there was something dramatic that required evacuation, you would evacuate it in the same means that you evacuate now.
I guess
we're not reducing the level of safety within the building. We're only we're increasing it during this flood event, and anything worse than that, you lose no ability to get out of the building.
I guess my question would be is if there was a flood, because obviously the buildings that are closer to the water would flood, and there's no plans at the present time to flood-proof them, you would move to the second floor and allow the building to flood. You would not leave the building.
That's generally true. There may be some personnel that are assigned to leave the building, but folks running the office and dispatch, they would already be on in the mezzanine offices. There'd be no need for them to go anywhere from the first floor, because the first floor is now completely for storage. They would already be on the mezzanine in their offices, and the second floor itself, which we're not touching, they would already be there. So nobody has to go anywhere to keep the building operational and to keep the borough communications running. It really reduces movement in the event of a flood, and it allows everyone to keep working in the same location where they spend their days.
And my last question to wrap this up, because we do have a draft resolution which was sent to all committee members. I believe it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to ask the committee members to take a look at it now, and Michael to share it on the screen. I know this is not probably within something you can answer, but have you thought about looking for another site? Because with sea level rise and constant flooding, I mean, granted, you have the flood vents to allow for water to go through, and not too long from now, you'll have permanent water in that first floor and frequent storms, which will make the building unusable. So has the fire department looked at other sites which are not in flood zone A or a similar area?
Also, excellent question. I'd like to defer to Irma Fontaine for that answer. Irma, are you with us?
Irma,
using the chat room.
you hit *9 to unmute yourself.
Hello?
There you are.
There you are.
Oh my gosh, look at that technology. Here I am typing as fast as I can. Thank you so much for letting us present to you today about the vacating of the building under severe storms. That's an operational question that the design team, we can't answer. Division 1 is on the second floor, and they are the managers of all the EMS in that area. You know, there's several EMS stations that are in the lower part of Manhattan. So when it comes down to a severe storm event, that call is going to be made by EMS operations. It depends on the severity of the storm. The building, we're designing the renovation. Cameron Engineering has designed the renovation so that it will permit water to come in as easily and then also easily have it flood back out. When it comes down to these storms that are more and more aggressive and more frequent, I mean, the fire department constantly is searching for more properties because the more congested New York becomes, the more people there are in New York, the more there is a need for us, for first responders. And so we recognize that, and we want to be there for all of the communities everywhere, but it's a matter of real estate, and we all know how Manhattan is with real estate. So right now, what we have is the location on the pier, and that's the one that we have to deal with until an opportunity arises where we could possibly relocate EMS Station 4 and Division 1.
Okay, thank you. And now that I have you on the available to speak, just one question. You mentioned congestion and more people, and if you've been in that area, there's a very active bike lane and pedestrian path. Unfortunately, that sidewalk, which is not EMS, I took a walk out there the other day. All the vehicles were NYPD, which were blocking the sidewalk, which forces people to in the bike lane and conflicts. There is one signal I believe that's your main egress in and out of the area, but there is another entrance which is not signaled and does not have a guard. Have you looked at adding a signal, because that walkway is extremely active at all times, especially on weekends and especially during the mornings, not to mention the school children who go back and forth to the school located across the street. Liability-wise, I'm just hoping that we can look at adding a signal, because I think a signal is a little easier than putting a 20 or a traffic signal person there every single day of the week, you know. But have you looked at adding a signal?
We haven't. In all honesty, we haven't. But being that the community board, you guys are saying that maybe we should, I took a note, and I'm going to definitely start looking into this and see who I need to speak to possibly get a signal added there.
Okay.
Yeah, I took a note. I'm going to dig into it a little bit.
All right, and does this add any more lights to your building? Because that area is extremely dark, and I know you're not responsible for lighting underneath the FDR, but usually when you upgrade buildings, you upgrade the lights to LEDs or something that has a higher calendar power.
Yes, we are definitely, we are adding more lighting to the facade of the building that will then illuminate the parking area. I don't think the lights are going to be strong enough to illuminate the sidewalk under the FDR, because there is quite a distance between the building facade and the sidewalk. So generally speaking, we are adding light fixtures all around all four sides of the building, but we are not adding any lights at the sidewalk area.
Okay.
And the platform itself will also be lit at a responsible level. Just like Irma said, going to light the site, but probably not enough to increase the foot candle level at the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to put this in a resolution. I'm just going to make a suggestion, because a lot of people do not know the function of that building in the neighborhood. We see it, we just don't know what it's for and the function. A lot of the fire stations in the area do tours for schools. So I would suggest, and I know you have, the building's probably not secure enough to do tours, but to consider having tours for the local schools, so at least people have an understanding of the value of this building and that it serves our community, as opposed to what the heck is that underneath the FDR.
Very good. Yes, thank you. I took a note also. I will definitely be speaking to people about that in the fire department. it's the building is very quiet. It's really, you can pass by it 100 times and never even know what it is. But hopefully after the renovation and we do the repairs to the masonry and so forth and the doors, that fire department red plus new signage, new lighting, hopefully it'll be a little bit more visible in the community. And certainly I will definitely be talking with people at headquarters to see if making some tours from time to time at this station would be possible for the community.
Okay. Michael, I see Fabrico from FDNY has his hand up.
Yeah, Fabrizio. Go ahead, Fabrizio.
Do you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we do.
All right, so just to add on to Irma's point, so in terms of FDNY and the general community, in terms of making the EMS station open, prior to the renovations, I mean, we've used the EMS station in open houses, and with any particular firehouse or EMS station, we've always welcomed ultimately connecting for better awareness, not only on our first responders, but on general fire and life safety information, utilizing those spaces as a tool. We could definitely explore as a department continuing to do so. However, given the current constraints of COVID-19 and exactly accessing and guidelines of accessing public spaces, we're still waiting on guidelines on that. But again, I think for future, post-development and post-construction, I mean, we could definitely continue those efforts. And the fire department is always open to using its facilities for educational purposes and awareness purposes as well.
All right. I appreciate that, and take that up in about hopefully a year from now, but who knows. Are there any, Val has a question? Go ahead, Val.
I think also you mentioned educational purposes. I think that for the community, I like the idea of the educational purposes because of the purposes in terms of you're telling us that EMS, fire department, police department, you're talking about basic safety personnel. And so I think one other thing to think about is what, various presentations. I don't want to say what exactly now because I think that the environment that we're in, and I'm assuming we're going to be in this kind of environment for the next 12 to 18 months while we wait for a vaccine, that what you would do is possibly come up with some presentations once this is done to let the community know the safety advantages. And that might be done, like I say, if this is done before 12 to 18 months, I'm assuming that Zoom and these kind of presentations are what we're going to have for 12 to 18 months while we wait for the vaccine. So I would think that maybe what you might want to do is some type of presentation that educates various age groups as to the safety benefits. Because I think that's what people want, the safety benefits.
Yeah. So do you still, are you guys still hear me or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Okay. All right. So the one thing that I would say, that's a great idea. The department's already taken proactive steps on a digital platform of developing opportunities for people to interact and learn about an EMS station. I would welcome that everyone visit fdnysmart.org/connect. On there's actually an EMS station tour, which is more geared toward younger crowds, of course. But exactly what an EMS station does, talking about the differences of an ambulance and stuff like that. But that's definitely something that the department is looking to develop right now in this digital age that we've now entered of doing everything remotely and from a distance. Furthermore, in terms of just life safety, beyond fire safety education, there are also other aspects of EMS awareness when it deals with CPR and hands-only CPR training that we've always done. I can't recall if the division, which is that's where or the EMS station, which the building houses in and will continue to house, has hosted. But I think that's something that we could explore with the division commander or with the station captain to see, depending on the layout and the logistics of an event, of hosting something possibly in the form, in the future, of course, of either some hands-on training or digital training of some sort. But definitely we could explore that ultimately.
I think the one other thing with that would be in terms of community outreach. in terms of, you know, possibly posting something in buildings down here on the waterfront to let people know that this is available digitally. So that it's not that I'm saying that you go out and do a presentation, but you at least go out to the different developments on the waterfront and let them know, put up something, or go to the management office and have them put up something that lets people know that this is available. Because I think that this really helps people to feel more confident when they know that there is help across the street. Thank you.
We'll take note of that. Thank you.
All right, so I noticed we've got about 60 people, participants. So if anyone wants to make or ask a couple of questions, we're just going to keep it brief. I'm just going to add a couple of clauses to this draft of the resolution. But if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. I don't see any, and I don't think Michael sees any. So I don't need to read this resolution, do I, Michael? I'm asking Michael.
I was actually just going to ask you if you wanted me to read it so that you didn't.
Yes, can you read it, please? And I'm gonna and for those who are on the committee, the language I want to add has to do with adding a second traffic control signal to the other entrance, and some language about hosting or doing some outreach and hosting a community educational type of event or events. So, Michael, if you want to start.
Sure. Whereas the FDNY EMS number 4 station is located on Pier 36 and suffered from severe flooding during Superstorm Sandy, and whereas this left the station completely without power during a major city emergency as the electrical system failed, as well as the at-grade backup generator and other mechanical and electrical systems were compromised, and whereas to avoid future loss of emergency response services in a coastal flooding scenario, the FDNY is planning to elevate the critical systems to a height of 16 feet above sea level. And whereas the current at-grade exterior emergency power generator and electrical systems will be set on new steel platforms located at 16 feet above sea level and protected by steel enclosures with bollards around the structure to protect against vehicle impact. And whereas the building's interior will be renovated with an expanded mezzanine between the first and second floors to allow the current first floor offices and kitchen to be elevated above flood and wave action elevations to a height of 17.96 feet above sea level. And whereas while this will not substantially change the exterior appearance of the building, this work will include rooftop mechanical installations, which should be largely hidden behind the parapet when viewed from grade, repairs to facade cracking, the replacement of windows, a new parapet, replacing a deteriorating wall, new exterior lighting, upgraded signage, door painting, and a new exterior staircase enclosure. Therefore, be it resolved, ...
Does anyone have any comments on that resolution, the language as written? I'm going to bullet point this primarily because the screen I'm looking at is small, and I've got 6 screens up right now. This is the whereas, and if someone can give me language, that'd be helpful. Whereas the need for a second
Can we say something like whereas Community Board 3 notes pedestrian and traffic issues in this area and requests the addition of an additional traffic signal? Something like that, more eloquent.
Brian, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Brian?
Yeah.
Can you sort of take that language that Michael just mentioned?
Okay.
Do you want me to say it again?
Yeah.
No, I heard it. I can write something up.
Okay.
Are you going to give me a minute to do that? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go.
Sorry, Ryan. It's my fault.
That's right. Are we, okay, so am I trying to type this up and then come back to you? I'm sorry, I want to make clear what our process is here.
Right now, because we have a draft, we're going to add just that whereas to the draft. We're not going to change it on screen. We're going to read it back as part of the resolution.
So is it enough to say, whereas Community Board 3 is concerned about pedestrian safety at the site, we request an additional traffic signal to be installed?
Yes, and for the folks who are here from the fire department, what's the proper name for that second entrance? Because I know it's not as used as frequently as the main entrance. Is it just an entrance?
I would just call it secondary entrance. I can't imagine what it would be called other than the secondary entrance. The main entrance already has a light, so I would call it the secondary entrance.
The
Secondary.
entrance for the EMS station is for the EMS station only. The entrance that we are discussing, I believe, might be secondary. Might be the right word. It could be since we don't know what it serves. Let's call it secondary. But again, for the EMS station, that driveway is EMS only, and we are not changing the amount of traffic coming in or out.
Right. So let's just call it the EMS secondary entrance.
So that
And
would
also,
be, yep.
Also add, it's not just pedestrian, it's also
Vehicle or bicycle?
bicycles. Yeah.
Whereas Community Board 3 is concerned with pedestrian and bicyclist safety at the EMS secondary entrance, we request an additional traffic signal be installed.
And Val, do you have language about the, I'm basically trying to figure out how we're going to say, we want them to host educational events for the local community. If you have language, that would be helpful.
Well, my thought was that they do community outreach to let people know about whatever presentations they're having, not necessarily that it's just tours, because I think you have some senior citizens that may actually like a virtual tour better than having to go walk over there and walk around the building. So my thing is just really that whereas that they would do community outreach to the various developments near the waterfront to let them know about any educational activities that they're sponsoring. That's my thing, is that there's community outreach to inform residents of available educational presentations. And I think that's kind of broad, kind of general. But you know, for me, the issue is the outreach. That there's like signs put up in various buildings.
Trevor, I can
Yes.
try and give that. Whereas residents would benefit from information, and then on the purpose of the EMS facility, CB3 requests additional community outreach and educational presentations.
Right, I guess to inform residents of presentations.
Okay.
You know, community outreach to inform residents of presentations. I think a lot of times they do presentations, they do tours, and the community doesn't necessarily know that they're happening. Whereas if something is posted in buildings, they do.
Hi, this is Fabricio. Actually, one suggestion, if I may, maybe the language, and this is just from a fire department perspective, because I just want to be sure that anything that's being done, you know, possibly at the station or outside of the station or wherever, you know, it has to make operationally, you know, it has to be, of course, done in consultation with operations, but possibly one thing that could be said is maybe increase fire and life safety outreach, because it's not necessarily just about the station. I think when it comes to emergency response and I guess, overall safety and prevention awareness, I think it's just increasing outreach of generally fire and life safety messaging, and tying into the fact that, you know, that there is an EMS station there and making the community aware of first responders and what they do.
Okay. I think that still generally falls under the whole concept of community outreach to inform residents of available information and presentations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ryan, is that enough to work with?
Yes.
Okay. We've done this before, so we're going to just continue because I understand that the language probably needs a little wordsmithing, but we will work on that. Therefore, be it resolved, would be we approve for the design of the FDNY EMS Station number 4 at Pier 36. And Michael, can you scroll up to the therefore? There's nothing there, obviously, because we wrote this.
Yeah.
But therefore, be it resolved, and Ryan, you can read this last section back. The Community Board 3 supports the, and what, are we calling it the design, or are we calling it the renovation, asking the fire department as to how you, what's the proper phrase for this? Or is it rehab or floodproofing?
Scott, do you have a preference?
I think we should call it rehabilitation. Rehabilitation and flood mitigation.
Rehab and flood mitigation.
Yes, please.
For the EMS station located at Pier 36. All right, committee members, do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
Motion approved.
Seconded.
I think we're gonna have to do roll call, and this is a little bit of a challenge.
Do you want me to try again?
Yeah.
I've got it. I have a list now in front of me.
Yeah, Ryan has a list. Ryan, do you want to do a quick roll call?
Okay. Trevor,
Yes.
Kay,
Yes.
David Adams, Yaron Altman, Carlin Chan,
Yes.
Ryan Gillum, yes. Valentina Jones,
Yes.
Michael Marino,
Yes.
Carolyn Ratcliffe,
Yes.
Robin Chattel, Josephina Velez.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone? Okay.
No. So as we like to say when we meet in person, if you're done with this agenda item and you're not staying for the rest of the meeting, please leave quietly. Trevor, you're muted.
Thank you, FDNY, for that presentation, for informing us about what the function of that building that's been there for quite some time. So it was interesting, but thank you. I'm going to assume we can move on. And as usual, the committee has voted on this. It still needs to go to full board. Does anyone know the full board date offhand?
Not next Tuesday, but the following Tuesday.
Following Tuesday, where the full board will vote on it, but doesn't mean that there's going to be some issues, but you have the support of the committee. So once again, thank you. I guess they left. Next up, a discussion about the Lower East Side Ecology Center's compost facility. And I believe, is she on to give a presentation?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So if you want to introduce yourself and give a presentation, and we'll start the discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Trevor and Community Board 3 Parks Committee for having us. It seems like ages ago we were supposed to come on the committee in March, and we live in a very different time now. And here we are in June, but I would like to thank for this opportunity to make a presentation. And I want to start to just talk a little bit about our organization, just in case people are not familiar with us. My name is Cristina Datz Romero, and I'm the one of the co-founders and the executive director of the Lower East Side Ecology Center. And this year marks our 30-year anniversary of our composting, community-based composting program, which we started on a city-owned lot with community board approval in 1990. Until COVID forced us to close down our compost program, we served over 3,500 households through 10 drop-off locations that are really located within a tight 3-mile radius of the East River Park compost yard. And we diverted over 15,000 pounds of waste out of landfills each week. The composting program has been in East River Park for 22 years and allowed us to anchor both of our stewardship program in the park and our street tree stewardship program by amending depleted soil in our community and really contribute to the overall health of the Lower East Side. The compost yard also provides educational opportunities from workshops to volunteer opportunities. Right now, we are already hosting volunteers in the compost yard because the moratorium was lifted for park volunteers. And this week we had we obviously don't allow large groups to come, but we already had 10 volunteers giving us a hand. And there is a real interest in engaging with this program. We are here tonight to ask CB3 for a support letter to remain in East River Park as long as construction allows, and to be included in the final design of a rebuilt East River Park. So construction, of course, refers to ESCR. Right now, the ESCR construction in this portion of the park is slated, at least at the latest slideshows that we saw, to start in the summer of 2023. However, the city announced in December of 2019 that they are planning to replace the compost yard with a temporary lawn as a mitigation measure for construction impacts of ESCR. This mitigation measure was only presented to the community once the design was approved by the Public Design Commission, and the decision lacks transparency and community input. Additionally, the city has never shared what will happen to this space past its proposed use as a temporary lawn. Including a composting space in the final design of a rebuilt East River Park will allow for a resilient and sustainable park, and the environmental programs that the Ecology Center offers is as essential to protect our community from climate change as is flood protection. Relocating the compost yard for a temporary lawn as early as September 15th will add tremendous strains to our organization at a time when we would like to step up and provide composting services to our community in light of the city's suspension of all composting programs. We have submitted a hard copy of petitions that we collected in January and February with over 2,000 signatures from local residents. Also, our online petition has close to 8,000 signatures, which really shows the support that this program enjoys here in the community. And we also have asked that people who support this agenda item tonight sign in with the hashtag #SaveOurCompost, which is a citywide coalition advocating for equitable access to community-based programs in light of the city composting cuts to bridge the gap until a mandatory curbside organics program is implemented. All to say that this program we feel is more important than ever. And this is a 33-year-old environmental organization that is really trying to step up to the plate and provide services to this community to stay to be sustainable. And we are really at a great risk of being totally uprooted from this community. And we hope that CP3 will support our request. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And as she mentioned, we actually have two petitions. One, I believe we have the electronic version, and the one you submitted recently. Clearly a lot of support, and the reason why I'm a little flustered is because of getting a whole bunch of emails between 4 and 6:29 with support for this. So I'm papers all over my desk just trying to go over all this, and I do have 3 draft resolutions in front of me, which I'm not going to send to everyone. They're going to have to read it because I've been editing it as the meeting has started. But I want to give folks a chance to speak. I know there are quite a few people here, so I'm going to start with the committee members with their hands raised, and we'll start with committee members first.
Trevor, I can't raise my hand because I'm the host, but I'd like to.
Well, let's start with you then, Mike.
I would just like to say I'm fully in support of the Compost Center, the Lower East Side Ecology Center, and the Compost Yard staying in the park for as long as possible and being returned when ESCRA even is finished, because they've been a great addition to the neighborhood, to the community. My organization has partnered with them numerous times, and I think it would be a great loss to the community to lose the Ecology Center and the Compost Yard.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat, but I agree with you, Michael. I'm looking for other committee members. I see Kay, and I see Carolyn's physical hand raised, and also she put up a clappy sign. So we'll go to Kay first.
Yeah, I just echo those remarks, and thank you, Christina, for your diligence and continuing to come back and back and back. And sorry you have to fight this hard for something that's this good. That's sadly often the case, but really totally in support.
Thank you. Carolyn, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm trying.
You're good.
We can hear you. Try again.
Okay.
Good.
I volunteered with Christina with the compost when it was on 8th Street between B and C. I compost regularly in community gardens. And I believe that it is something that really helps our environment. It's something that I have totally believed in for years. And I think so many people in my neighborhood, they were really upset when the city canceled the compost program. I mean, we did, Carmen's Garden was like a drop-off site for community compost. And we had people coming after the city said, stop it right away. You know, really upset because they no longer had a place to bring their compost. People believe in this, and particularly this neighborhood has always advocated for continuing to recycle and compost, and anything that could be done to bring Christine back with the Lower East Side Ecology Center. It's been a part of our neighborhood, a really critical and vital part. So I'm totally in support of it, and I ask my fellow committee members to please support returning the Ecology Center to the East River Park.
Thank you, Carolyn. Are there any more committee members? I do see one board member who has their hand raised, so I'm going to go to Lisa first, and then we're going to go to those folks who are in attendance but not part of the community board. So Lisa Kaplan, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Trevor. I 100% along with everyone who has spoken in support of the compost yard. But I wanted to, and I very much in favor of the resolution to forcefully ask parks to have them return. But in addition, I'd be interested in hearing from Christine a little bit about the status of the firehouse too, and what's happening with that, and whether we should also address the issues with regard to the firehouse in this resolution.
Well, I think we're going to have to stick with the compost yard, and I know it's been months trying to get this on the agenda in the pandemic, so I really want to focus on that for the purposes of this agenda item.
But it seems like it's about the Ecology Center. It doesn't seem like a deviation. It's all about their program is adjacent to the yard in the firehouse. And my understanding is that now the Parks Department is threatening not to repair it. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more about that.
Trevor, do you want me to address that?
You can address it, but I can for what I'm looking at, and I know, as you know, we've been trying to get this done for months.
Yeah.
That if that's an issue, we can look at it for a future agenda item, but I really want to stick to this because I want to get this done. You know, this has been sitting on our table for quite a few months. So you can address it, but I think we're going to have to look at another resolution for that.
You know, just a quick update in terms of the fireboat house. Yes, we are also supposed to move out of this building in September. That's at least what the city has given us as a timeline. Part of the agreement was once we move out of the fireboat house that we would be be able to use the Seward Park Park House, and Parks has committed to making upgrades to that building to make it actually usable. And unfortunately, I just recently had a email conversation with Sam Biederman from Parks where I asked him about both, you know, the engineering study for the fireboat house and Seward Park. He mentioned to me that Parks is not able to do any upgrades to Seward Park Park House anymore. So it has a leaky roof. It has a whole bunch of issues that have not been addressed since last August when we first worked with the Parks Department and with Seward Park Conservancy to really figure out what would it take to make this space usable. And Parks is now saying because of COVID and budget cuts that they will just provide this building as is. And that is, again, really, you know, another strain on the organization that we, you know, somehow need to deal with. And so this is a development, and obviously we're not going to deal with it today in this meeting, but I just wanted to give an update to the community board so you understand what's going on there.
All right, thank you, because that's definitely news to me. So we're really going to have to get in contact with Parks because that's obviously news to me. But for the purposes of this resolution, we're going to focus on the resolution. And just after last night's exec meeting, this resolution was provided by the Lower East Side Ecology Center, obviously with some edits, but that's the source of the resolution. Any questions from, if there are any board members who are attending the meeting? All right, so we're going to go to the community. Is there anyone who would like to comment? I know some folks have filled out a speaker form and would like to speak. I mean, I think we are all on the same page with regards to the ecology centers. But if you want to speak, we're going to give you that opportunity now. And Fanny has raised her hand. Fanny?
I'm sorry, Trevor, before we start, did you want me to put the timer on or no?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Extremely important to really manage this meeting. We're going to go with a 2-minute timer. We're going to be very strict with that timer. It cuts the voice off at 2 minutes, so please be brief. If you want to be really efficient, a minute and a half would be really nice. Because I understand it's probably going to be the same voice, but we have some other agenda items. So Fanny, can you please start?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Sure. Whatever happened to the Department of Sanitation? Didn't you plan on having them come to a meeting to let us know their side to all of this or something? Whatever happened with that?
Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think you had actually mentioned that you wanted to hear
Right.
also from the Department of Sanitation. What sanitation is really telling us that they love our program, but they see that as a parks issue that needs to be resolved within that agency.
Yeah, but weren't they supposed to come to a CB3 or something? Like I remember before all of this, at the last meeting, I think Trevor or somebody, you guys mentioned that you guys were going to invite Department of Sanitation, and I don't know whatever happened with that. I mean, we would love to hear what they have to say. I mean,
I do remember, Fanny. You know, I think this is one of the last meetings before COVID-19, and I'm going to look into that to see if they haven't weighed in on. And I think that's a citywide issue, and that's the reason why I was asking for sanitation to speak. But I think they've taken a different opinion about opinion on composting in parks as a whole. So I do think it's still important. And Fanny, thank you for reminding me, and I'll make sure I'll address it.
okay, thank you.
I see Amy B, and I'm just going by what's on the screen, so I apologize if you've had your hand raised before someone else. So I'm just going to read off the names. Annie B, and then Wendy. So Amy B, please.
That's Amy B, that's me. So thanks for giving us our minutes by Zoom. And I was one of those ones that sent in testimony to you, but I just want to make a brief addition to it. And this is dealing with Christine's comment about the lack of transparency. So when our foil for communications regarding this temporary lawn were not responded to, I started trying to put together all the documents from all of the slide decks, and I sent you some relevant copies of that. But there's one addition that I found afterwards. And this was on October 10th. There was no indication that the compost yard would be closed prior to 2023. On November 20th, there were actually drawings for the BID that show in complete detail the lawn conversion and everything, all the demolition needs to be done for the lawn conversion. That was on November 20th. December 12th, there were presentations with no indication of design change. And on December 16th is when the PDC approved the temporary lawn to replace the compost yard. And this was really foolish pre-COVID, but it's even more foolish to think about spending money on a temporary lawn post-COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for making that a minute and a half. That's perfect. And you were able to summarize exactly how you feel. Next, Wendy.
This is also from my testimony that I sent in that, you know, replacing the lawn with passive recreation, it would be so much cheaper to enliven Pier 36 or simply open Pier 42 that are both languishing empty nearby. Compost being trashed by NYC is a microcosm of the tone-deaf, destructive ESCR plan. It ignores the massive storm protection being built around vulnerable NYCHA campuses and will itself contribute to climate disruption, overheating, and poor health. Still lacking professional view and interim protection, the $1.5 billion ESCR plan is wasteful, inequitable, and now completely outdated in the COVID era, while restoring the community compost budget is worth every penny. Let's not destroy our chances for a better future by tossing Lower East Side Ecology Center, Earth Matter, and the Save Our Compost Coalition out. Council members, borough presidents, everybody, get behind this. It's been, every one of you has spoken for it and in favor for it, but look where we are right now. Meanwhile, Lower East Side Ecology Center not only helps East River Park, but there's scores of local parks, community gardens, and schoolyards that are verdant because of their compost. So let's keep this gateway to a more sustainable and healthy community open and flourishing. Let's do all we can for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Also a minute 30. Excellent. Frank. Frank is apparently flying an airplane.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, that's right. Let me just pull this up for 1 second. I just wanted to read, I sent 2 letters, and this one, it's short, so thank you. Dear members of CB3 Parks, we, the undersigned, would like to go on record as lending our support for the LES Ecology Center to remain at their current location for as long as construction will allow. We value the work LES Ecology Center has done both for their immediate surroundings and for the greater community at large. We believe the work they are doing is vital and enriching. We request that the LES Ecology Center be afforded the greatest consideration for remaining open. Their programming has had direct benefits to our shared community, and we would like any plans implemented to support them by being flexible to their needs. We also wish to see Executive Director Christine Detz-Romero be kept abreast and made fully aware of construction issues in advance that might affect LES Ecology Center. Thank you for your consideration and the opportunity to share our message of support with you. Sincerely, Nancy Ortiz, resident TA leader for Vladeck Houses 1 and 2, Carolyn English, resident board member of Masaryk Towers, and myself, Frank Avila Goldman, resident and board member of Gouverneur Gardens Housing Corp. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you, Frank. I just want to ask quickly if there's anyone else who would like to speak before I read this resolution, and I have one quick question for Christine before we move on. Okay. One of the things that's not clear is when did they tell you the removal would happen of the compost yard?
When did they tell us?
I'm sorry, I framed it the wrong way. When is the Ecology Center compost yard slated to be relocated or removed?
Well, that's also an interesting question because the city has put in a notice to proceed for the contract, and I think that was sent to elected officials and to the community board, but we were not made aware of that notice to proceed. There first was a letter that would put the date to August 31st, which would mean that construction could start in November. And then a second letter was sent to, I believe Community Board 3 received that too, that actually moved that construction date up to July 6th with the earliest possible construction starting September 15th. And we were not informed by the city of any of that.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to read a proposed draft of the resolution, and I'm going to go paragraph by paragraph. If anyone has any comments, Kay has a question, sorry.
Did Community Board 3 receive that letter? And if so, wouldn't we have informed Christina and the Compost, Lower East Side Ecology Center? Does it, maybe Jim's on, he could tell us? Or not?
It's possible, I mean, but I don't know offhand.
It would seem useful for us to, at least going forward, be in good communication. And I realize the office is completely overwhelmed right now. So if we find another, I'm happy to be that conduit if nobody else will, so that anything that we know, they know.
Sure.
So.
Okay. All right. So the first paragraph, whereas the Lower East Side Ecology Center has operated a compost environmental education and stewardship program in East River Park since 1998 with support from Community Board 3 and under a license agreement with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. Whereas over 3,500 households donate their food scraps through 10 drop-off locations that are located within a 3-mile radius to the East River Compost Yard, processing over 15,000 pounds of waste each week. Whereas 25 local community groups ranging from community gardens to schools and block associations have received free finished compost from the Ecology Center to care for public open space. Whereas the Lower East Side Ecology Center has used compost to anchor its stewardship program in East River Park and its street tree stewardship program to mend depleted soil to contribute to more vibrant and healthy, I think. Sorry. Greenery and trees right here in the Lower East Side, serving the local community by providing thousands of annual volunteer hours. Whereas New York City Parks has received over 300 cubic yards of free finished compost for use in neighborhood parks and is in need of managing yard waste such as leaves and weeds generated in parks year round, as well as finished compost to maintain green open space. I do see someone with their hand raised. I'm going to attend to that, your comment after I finish this, but do any of the committee members have any comments so far? Okay. Whereas replacing the compost yard with a temporary lawn as a mitigation measure for construction impacts of ESCR was not publicly announced by the city and will require the LES Ecology Center to relocate its compost and office operations at a high organizational cost, further undercut by the city's post-coronavirus defunding New York City composting programs and partners. Whereas the long-term sustainability of the Ecology Center's compost program is threatened by the early removal of its compost site from East River Park, and whereas the future design of the area of East River Park currently occupied by the compost yard has not been included in the final ESR design documents, and no information about the final design has been shared at public meetings. Does anyone have any comments about the whereas? Committee members? Okay, we have two therefore clauses. Therefore be resolved that CB3 supports the LES Ecology Center's compost yard to stay operational in East River Park until ESR construction reaches this respective part of the park, currently scheduled for Q3 of 2023. Therefore be resolved that CB3 supports the LES Ecology Center in its long-term partnership with the city through its compost and environmental stewardship programs to continue to add the substantial value and important service to the community by collaborating with the city to rebuild and continue these programs in our home on the Lower East Side. I don't see any comments from the committee members. I see one hand raised. So Michael, if you can unmute that person and we can hear that person's comment.
They have to unmute themselves. You can press your space bar down or just hit the microphone. Oops. Do that again, please. Sorry, I muted you. There you go.
I just want to support the Lower East Side Ecology Center and all the great work they've done and keeping them in the park permanently and in the neighborhood. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what is your name?
My name is Max Katz.
All right, thank you, Max.
Trevor, I'd like to make a motion to approve this resolution.
I have someone second it.
I second it, Val.
Okay. All in favor? We're going to roll call.
Roll call.
You want me to do that?
Yes, Ryan, roll call.
Trevor Holland,
Yes.
Kay Webster,
Yes.
David Adams, Yvonne Altman, Carlin Chan,
Yes.
Ryan Gillum, yes. Valentina Jones,
Yes.
Michael Marino,
Oh, yes.
Carolyn Ratcliffe,
Yes.
Robin Chattel, Josephine Velez.
Yes.
You're muted again, Trevor. Hold on.
Thank you, everyone. The motion passes. Thanks for coming to this virtual meeting for this portion of the agenda. I see a lot of hands in the air, so we'll see what happens, but, and Christine, if you could just remind me about the sanitation thing, issue through an email, so I can follow up with the office about that issue.
Yeah, I will do that. And thank you so much for your support tonight.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda, we're going to move to the EMS Coastal Resiliency Update, Interim Flood Protection. Zoom meetings, I think. I think Will's here. Is Will available? Will Fisher?
He's definitely logged in.
Hey everybody, how are you? I have church bells outside my apartment right now. So greetings, additional greetings. Trevor, the agenda item for this one, this is the...
We're doing ESCR right now.
Okay, do we have parks and DDC for ESCR?
I don't see them on the invite. Michael, I didn't see them listed here.
No, they weren't invited. Will, when I asked Will, you said you would cover all that.
I'm sorry, no, I'm only able to cover the ferry. The ESCR doesn't fall under our portfolio.
All right, well, let's do this. Yeah,
and Faye told me that she had discussed it with you. Okay.
All right, well, let's do this. We're going to shorten the agenda and handle this later for time purposes. There are a number of mitigations that were planned and a lot of things going on. We're not taking a vote here, but if you can just give us a quick update. I know there are a couple, we received some comments from the public about the proposed or the changes that are happening, and I'm going to ask them to follow up with you and take the comments back. But if you can just give an update, and just for those who are still participating in this meeting, this is just an update. We're going to have to move ESCR to next month, but this is just an update on one of the potential impacts, and this is also COVID related to the ferry itself. But Will, if you want to proceed.
Yeah, so again, the only thing that I can give an update on is New York City Ferry. I don't have information on ESCR, which is
fine, Will.
Okay. So so everyone, yeah. So generally, there have been some updates made as a result of the. I mean, I'll get into this a little bit later regarding challenges with city spending during. Because of the significantly decreased revenues during the COVID crisis, as well as the amount that the city is spending on response to that crisis. So EDC, as the managing agency for New York City Ferry, we've instituted a few changes with the ferry system that we're projecting are going to be able to save $10 million in expense funding for the city in fiscal year 21, which begins on July 1st. Although we've already implemented those changes with notifications along those routes for the folks that do use them. So generally, just to give an update on that to folks, I'm looking at my map here. So there's 2 landings that are impacted, although we continue to maintain service at those landings for the NYC ferry system. So the 2, and I guess the only one that's in Community District 3 is Corlear's Hook, but I'll also talk about Stuyvesant Cove, which is up on Avenue C near East 20th Street. But for the essentially the Lower East Side route, which ran from Wall Street Pier 11 to Corlear's Hook to Stuyvesant Cove up to East 34th Street in Midtown, we're maintaining service on all of those landings, but we have folded the Stuyvesant Cove and Corlear's Hook landings into different routes and played down and taken off the Lower East Side route as it was known initially. So the Corlear's Hook ferry landing is now connected to the South Brooklyn route. So from Corlear's Hook, the vessels go south to Wall Street Pier 11 and then onwards to South Brooklyn, including the Red Hook stop, Brooklyn Bridge Park, and onwards down to Sunset Park. The Stuyvesant Cove landing is going to be added to the Soundview route. So from Soundview in the Bronx, the vessels will go to East 34th Street and then be added to, oh, thank you for whoever just added the map, Trevor or Michael.
You're welcome.
That wasn't me. I can tell you that right. That was Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Then. So yeah, it's a lot easier to see with the map here, but whereas previously the Corlear's Hook and Stuyvesant Cove and 34th Street were all connected on the same route, you can now see that Corlear's Hook is folded into the South Brooklyn route and Stuyvesant Cove is folded into the Soundview route. So this, among other changes that we are implementing, one of which being the delay of the opening of the new route that goes to Staten Island, and a closure of a parking lot that the ferry system paid for and maintained in the Rockaways, which was very seldom used. A variety of service changes such as those are going to be the ones that I just said I identified as saving $10 million in expense funding right now for fiscal year 21. It's obviously both on the revenue side, the city has taken a significant hit in terms of having decreased sales tax revenue, decreased other tax revenues. And then obviously the city is very much focused on stopping COVID in its tracks. And we're beginning to see a lot of very good progress. Obviously we have the phase 1 reopening this week. But right now the focus is really on dealing with that. So we're looking to save operating funds. And generally the biggest changes on these routes have been informed by ridership numbers. So for example, the ridership from Corlear's Hook to Long Island City, which was, I believe, the previous terminus of that route, was very, very low, like 1 or 2 folks per boat. And while we do understand that there are impacts and we do understand that some folks might be disappointed in the changes, I think overall it was the most fiscally responsible thing to do.
Will, can I ask a question about the ridership numbers? Were those taken pre-COVID or post-COVID?
Pre,
okay.
Yeah. And yeah, in response to COVID, we reduced service. It's still at least hourly at all of the landings, but we did reduce service in response to that. But the ridership numbers that we made these changes based off of, yeah, they're pre-COVID numbers when we were at normal levels.
Okay.
I'll just talk. So the $10 million, I mean, I think everybody's aware that the ferry is subsidized already, heavily subsidized by the city, and the subway system is in so much trouble. And the people who tend to ride the subways are essential workers, are health workers. So I'm hoping some of that 10 million finds itself there. And I'm not sure how you think about the future of the ferry system. You know, it's lovely, but you know, in terms of these times and the fiscal hard hits that we're going to get, it seems a little indulgent. One woman's opinion. Anyway, thank you.
Of course, and yeah, I think, you know, one of the benefits that we're seeing here, obviously it's a lot easier to change a ferry route and ferry service than to add or modify service in the subways or even with buses. So I think, thank you for the point there. And I think we will, you know, obviously continue to adjust and take a look at things, you know, the best way so we can optimize service going forward, given the conditions. And then hopefully, you know, when things get somewhat back to normal, we can reevaluate in that case as well.
Well, I want to follow up on Michael's question. I'm not sure if I followed correctly. For the Corliss Hook route or the Corliss Hook landing, pre-COVID numbers were, because I'm just trying to figure out, what are you talking about, daily, a particular day, or?
So the number I cited was somewhat of an extreme example. So let me explain it really quick. I don't have the number in front of me for all ridership from Corlear's Hook, but specifically the Corlear's Hook going north and eventually crossing to Long Island City. That was an example that we talked about as a team, and that was a connection that was made in the previous iteration of the route, where I believe the number of people per day making that connection among all of the different runs was 20 to 30 people total, and that amounts out to 1 or 2 people per vessel who were taking from Corlear-Sook all the way up and across to Long Island City. So that as an example of the ways that we are able to optimize, and we're seeing that most people from the Corlear-Sook landing are traveling south to Wall Street. So I don't have the full ridership numbers at that stop off the top of my head, but of course we're maintaining service there now, although on a different route, and we're going to continue to maintain service there throughout ESCR. We have that commitment from DDC and Parks that the landing is going to be accessible at all times during construction.
And numbers post-COVID or current numbers?
Could you repeat that question, Trevor?
Sorry, numbers for that landing as of today, COVID numbers.
I don't have the numbers right now, but it's very significantly down, and we've reduced service across the system in the COVID scenario. Although we're maintaining it at least hourly, system wide.
Right, and I'm only asking because. Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
I was just going to say, anecdotally, I can tell you that the times that I use that landing to take it to work to the Sty Cove station, I was maybe one of 2 or 3 people on the boat in the morning at 8:30. So I'm not surprised by the low ridership numbers. I am curious, Will, and again, I know you don't have the numbers in front of you, but do you happen to know, was there a difference in ridership numbers based on weekday versus weekend? Were more people taking it on the weekend recreationally, or is it mainly just commuters on the weekdays?
I mean, the numbers are most certainly different between, like oftentimes in the summer, you'll see the one going to the Rockaways. On the weekend, it has long lines, et cetera. But I think, first and foremost, we plan service for the system, and our team plans service for the system for commuters first. And, I think we're planning on based on getting people to work. And then, of course, on the weekends, there's, obviously the numbers change, but well over half, I think nearing on 3/4 of folks who take the ferry on weekdays are commuters.
Thank you.
And primarily because there's been a little bit of a change in our agenda because this is supposed to be part of the ESCR update, and we do not have that. So I understand there's some folks who want to speak about that, but Will, if you could send those numbers to the office for us, I just want to make sure that we're prepared to answer some questions, but I'm going to direct those who have questions who are in attendance to please contact EDC or Will for those questions. This was more informational.
I'll put my email in the chat box right now.
Right, this is more informational because I know there's some questions about it, and obviously it was a change that happened because of COVID, but I don't want to make this a discussion, and we may need to at some point. But if we could have those numbers, that'd be helpful. If you could just send it to the office. Will.
Great.
Thank you. Committee members. Michael, go ahead.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Committee members. Val. Val?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I guess my question is just, I'm not sure where we're at. I'm assuming, are you gonna come next month and talk about ESCR or update on that?
Val, what we're going to do is I'm going to see if we can put that back on the agenda for July, but Will's not here for ESCR. So
okay, all right, fine. That was all I wanted to know. Thank you.
And Wendy, I do see your hand raised, but I'm going to ask you to use Will's email. This is a bit of a quirk in the agenda. Unfortunately, we can't go into any further discussion. Hopefully next month.
About the ferry.
Right, but all right. I'm gonna give a little leeway, Wendy, and please keep it brief. But Will has put his email in the chat box. But please present your question. Go ahead.
I've been in touch with Will, but Will, hi. Directly in front of the ferry is a big parking lot. It's been empty all spring. Why doesn't that come a passive? Come to the community board asking if there can be free or discounted ferry rides to adjacent parks for low-income residents as part of mitigation for ESCR. And the answer always was, we'll get back to you on that. What do you think is the possibility of the passive lawn on that empty parking lot and free ferries or discounted ferries for residents? Governor's Island, Brooklyn Bridge Park, the Rockaways.
Yeah, so regarding the parking lot first, I unfortunately have to defer to Parks given that that's, we do operate the service from their property there. I'm looking at my other screen here with the map on it. But we are, as you know, on both a permanent park as well as a temporary activation of Pier 42 for a potential mitigation option for during the work. I think regarding getting to Brooklyn Bridge Park or other places during construction, I think this actually is a big help because as Michael showed, when Michael put up the map before the ferry system, there's now a one-seat ride using NYC ferry to Brooklyn Bridge Park from the Corlers Hook stop. So before, whereas you would have had to transfer at Wall Street, sometimes the times don't line up perfectly, so it can take a long time. Now it's yeah, thank you, Michael, for bringing that back up. So folks are going to be able to get to Corlers Hook to both the north end of Brooklyn Bridge Park at Dumbo and the southern end down by Pier 6, where there's sports, where there's barbecue areas, et cetera, just with a one-seat ride. And then I think with the funding, I think obviously there's everybody in the city is being squeezed from every direction in terms of reduced revenues and increased spending in response to COVID. So I think it's really challenging for us to make such a commitment right now. I will say, however, that we are with 19 days left in the before the budget will be approved. I do hope that in fiscal year 21 we'll have additional clarity on where there could be additional funding allocated. And then I think, again, Parks is not here, not to speak for them, but I imagine that the answer would be similar, is that right now, while we are still in the heat of the COVID crisis, I think that's what we're dealing with first before talking about new expenditures.
And Pat, I'm going to give some leeway if you, I'm going to hope, and I see you, Susan, also, Morris, the tiny little box on my screen. If you could keep it brief, because we're really bouncing off the guardrails at this point with an agenda item. So if you could keep it brief, it'd be helpful. So
yeah,
Pat,
I'll keep it really, oh, sorry.
And I'm going to go for Pat and then Susan Morris and just brief because we really need to keep this brief, but go ahead. Pat?
Yeah, can you go for Susan first, please?
All right, Susan.
Thanks. We live in a transportation desert. I know the numbers have been low, but the thing is that the ferry has been this extraordinary kind of resource for us who live all the way east. And it was catching on. It was one of these things that was coming up. But the thing is that I understand that the route that you've given us is great for going south, but there's no way that we can basically go north to the 34th Street transfer point. And the thing is that there are two lines that go right by us that really would cost very, very, very little to basically include Corlears Hook, because it wouldn't be any kind of extra, petrol or gasoline or any kind of fuel to get us. And the two lines are either adding us to the Soundview route or alternatively adding us to the Astoria route, because the Brooklyn Navy Yard is directly across the way. It comes literally, it almost kisses the Corlears Hook dock before it goes to Wall Street, and to go that route. And that would also be another way of getting more people to the Navy Yard, because the bus routes that basically go right there, as well as the bike share station, there are so many people from this neighborhood that are trying to get to the Navy Yard that can't get there. So my hope is just that you would basically give us some access going northbound, which is what we don't have any longer.
Got you. And yeah, thank you for the comment. I think, and again, we certainly understand that some of the changes are disappointing, and appreciate the feedback on that. Again, yeah. It is a good thing, I think, to demonstrate the sort of flexibility and the nimbleness of the system in terms of being able to respond.
Yeah. Right, or just add us. Because Soundview, the Soundview route was great for Stuyvesant Hook. They didn't lose anything. They got both north and south, and they just went further. But we lost this way. We gained going south, but we lost going north.
Right, understood. And I think, you know, the folks on our planning team who look at this also try to look at everything from the bus network as well. So like where there are sort of multiple ways to get different places. I think as well, Susan, is a very good point regarding, you know, other service or other routes that go right by. But one thing to consider is that depending on the weather and how easy it is to dock, there's, I think, usually between 5 and 9 minutes of the docking and layover time and to load on and off. So considering folks who are coming from the Bronx and from Queens, you know, each additional stop adds, you know, another 5 or 10 minutes to each of those routes. So I think that's what we need to balance is the.
Yeah, I think it would be 5 tops, to tell you the truth, because I've watched it and I've timed it myself from the times that I've used the ferry, which I use a tremendous amount. And now I'm just completely hamstrung.
Okay, right. All right. So
Thank you.
You have my contact information. I'd be happy to follow up with you further if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Pat, if you could be brief, please.
Yes, I'd like to second what Susan is suggesting and add that the ESCR had promised mitigation, which means that there should be alternates to the parkland that we're losing. The ferry system allows that to do a route like Susan's talking about that would allow people to quickly get from one point to another that includes a lot of parks, I think was part of the mitigation and that could be very popular and needs to be pushed rather than backing off from that kind of mitigation. So I would really urge the city to consider what we're losing in this park and what we need to have gain, what kind of gain we need to have by being able to use other parks.
Okay, go ahead, Will.
I was just saying, yeah, thank you for your comment, Pat. Again, I think one thing that we are excited about is that whereas there would have been a transfer to get from the Corlers Hook site to Brooklyn Bridge Park, there's now a direct one-seat ride on the ferry. So hopefully that will be a little bit of solace during the construction for folks who are now able to get from the Lower East Side more quickly over to Brooklyn Bridge Park, where there's obviously a lot of open space. So we do hope that helps, but yeah, I appreciate your.
It would help a lot more if you would let kids from this neighborhood have free access to the ferry, because most of the kids in this neighborhood aren't going to have that kind of money to get over there. So that's another issue for mitigation.
Right.
I would like to see to consider.
All right, thank you. Give me just some clarity on, because I don't want to have to shut this chat box down, but some clarity on the ESCR interim flood protection. If there wants to be some blame, you can blame it on me. It will only covers BMCR, which is the next item, and not ESCR. So there is some scheduling issues, but we need a more robust in-depth presentation for ESCR. So I will speak with the office and get that on the agenda for next month. There's a lot going on, a lot of stuff. So we'll get it on the agenda, and we'll also add, because we won't have 6 or 7 items, hopefully we won't have 6 or 7 other items to deal with that will have a more robust, not just interim flood protection, but the park and the project itself, because there are some issues. So I hope that addresses it, and if not, then you can blame me. But next, and we'll continue for the project that he's here for, and that is the I'm going to call it the LMCR, because it's still old school. I guess it's old school, but the BMCR project, which we obviously have concern about, especially considering that New York Times article about federal funding. So I'm just going to leave it up to you, Will, and if you can give some background, because we still have quite a few people
yeah, of course.
in the meeting.
Great. So happy to talk about that. My colleague Jordan Salinger from the Mayor's Office of Resiliency is also on the line. So I'll kick off, given that the meat of it I think lies with EDC, but Jordan can chime in as well on the the federal funding, et cetera, because I think it's really important that we discuss that right now. So yeah, to remind everyone of the background, or for anyone who's been out of the conversation for a little while, the ESCR project, East Side Coastal Resiliency, is a joint project between the Parks Department and the Department of Design and Construction, which goes south to Montgomery Street near Pier 36. And then jointly with the Mayor's Office of Resiliency, EDC, which the Economic Development Corporation, we are managing the design work for the BMCR project, which is under the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency LMCR umbrella. BMCR standing for Brooklyn Bridge to Montgomery Street. So it goes in the Two Bridges neighborhood in Lower East Side up to Montgomery Street. So we don't have any materials to present this month, but I think it's obviously important that we give you all an update of what the project status is amidst the pandemic situation that we have here. So I believe, Trevor, when was the last time that we presented to the committee? I think it was probably early this year, January, February.
I don't even know what today is. I think January, February, maybe.
Right. So EDC has, we've contracted with AECOM, and they have a team of consultants working on the design of that project. The project is primarily funded with federal funding from the, which was allocated as part of the Sandy recovery allocation back in 2013 by Congress under the Obama administration. The specific funding is under the National Disaster Resilience Competition. So there are 13 cities and states grantees throughout the country that are working on various federally funded resiliency work that is funded with that funding stream, of which this is one. So again, the city and EDC designing that project. We, this spring, we're beginning to approach 75% design and getting from the sort of preliminary and midpoint of design onwards towards getting to final design. But as I mentioned before, obviously the city is experiencing some significant difficulties with loss of revenue during the COVID scenario. And in addition, EDC, by nature of typically when we work on consulting contracts, EDC will front money to pay consultants and then get reimbursed by the city on the back end. In order to preserve cash flow and funding for a lot of the response efforts that we are leading, such as emergency production of test kits and swabs, emergency production of new ventilators, emergency production of face shields and surgical gowns, et cetera, which EDC also happens to be working on. We've paused all consultant work on projects that are not related to COVID response. So unfortunately, BMCR was one of those projects. There's projects all throughout the 5 boroughs that are currently have work paused, and that was beginning in mid to late April. So the current pause right now that we're putting on projects is about 3 months. So we are looking forward to reevaluating in July when we can begin and get back to work. But again, like I mentioned before, I think a lot of this relies on the city budget process. So City Council is right now negotiating with the Mayor's Office over the budget for fiscal year 21, which is set to begin on July 1st of this year. So I think we're sort of waiting for that. But in addition, as I think a lot of folks on this call know, the city has been strongly advocating the federal government for additional funds in order to sustain operations. Because again, the city right now, the mayor announced a few weeks ago, the city anticipates between fiscal years 20 and 21, a $9 billion with a B, $9 billion revenue hit because of the decreased economic activity during COVID. So the city's obviously going to need to prioritize what services it maintains if there is indeed a shortfall as we get into later this year. So that said, the project is paused. So right now the work that we had been doing both on the design work and on the community engagement front is paused. Like I mentioned, I believe we came to this committee in February of this year, or perhaps January. Like Trevor said, I don't know. It's hard to keep track of time anymore, but I think we're very much looking forward to getting started. Again, we don't have a firm date for when that will be, but this is obviously a critically important project to protect the Two Bridges neighborhood from sea level rise and from storm surge. So with that said, I think I want to open for any questions on the project itself and the pause, and then Trevor, we can get to the project funding and the potential for a deadline extension of those federal funds.
Sure. So committee members. Okay, Will, I guess that leaves me. So I have a few. And I've heard this presentation also at other meetings and outside of the neighborhood related projects. And the difference here being that 176 million of this project is federally funded. The city right now has commitments about 26 million committed, and probably more, but that was a commitment. So I understand the pause, but the federal money is there. So I assume that once this pause ends, that we can start that project. But I have several questions, but with the split in funding, and I know you're asking for an extension, the project should be able to move forward with the restart in July, correct?
So again, I think it's gonna depend on the budget scenario then, but it's I'm going to sound very much like a bureaucrat here, so everyone bear with me. But the typical process for these projects, when there is and Jordan, feel free to jump in here if you'd like, for federally funded project that EDC is working on, typically the flow of the funding when we're paying for architects, when we're paying for engineers, et cetera, to do the planning work, EDC will pay up front. We will later seek reimbursement from OMB, from the city's Office of Management and Budget, and then OMB will seek reimbursement from HUD. So because there's the sort of multiple steps, we are preserving all of the money, all of the cash that we have on hand to pay for COVID response. So even if Trevor, at the end of the line in a couple of months, we would be able to get that money reimbursed. We're seeking not to spend it right now because we want to, preserve the cash that we have on hand to spend on COVID response. And again, that's we're building test kits, we're building surgical masks, et cetera. So that's what we're seeking to do right now with the pause, is to make sure that we preserve the cash on hand that EDC has, even if there are those federal funds available for the project as a whole. It would be a couple of months of lag time to get reimbursed from the city, and then from the city to get reimbursed from HUD. So I think it still does depend. We are seeking, obviously, to get back underway as soon as we can. But I don't think we have a firm date on when we'll be restarting.
Well, definitely bureaucracy, because what I'm hearing is that there's $176 million and that EDC normally fronts that money to pay, but because you're doing COVID response, you can't front the money, even though there's still $176 million left for whatever the amount is left now, but money left, but you can't technically get that money because you're doing COVID response, but you're in danger of losing that money because there's a spend down deadline because you're shifting efforts. But it would be a real shame if the city could not figure out a way to access its funds, because it will expire and the city will look really bad if they could not figure out a way to get $176 million from the current administration for flood protection for this project. So I hear you, and I'm probably gonna have to weigh on some of our public officials, because this is not really good news, because you're gonna go into the second part after these questions about the funding, which is there, but you usually front, but we're in danger of losing it, and it's $176 million because of the city's budget. So we need to figure out a way to make sure this happens. And I understand it's complicated, and there are levels, and COVID has changed everything, but there's still at least $176 million of federal funding left for a project that hasn't started.
Right.
So that's
right.
My first.
Yeah, and again, I think Jordan, are you on?
Yes.
Say again?
Okay, so Jordan, can you confirm for me right now that all of that 176 million that Trevor's referring to is currently sits with the federal government, and the city would be seeking reimbursements once certain milestones are reached, right?
Yeah. Yes, that is correct. And maybe this is the time to launch into the second part of this conversation. referenced a bit by both Will and Trevor before. Hi, everyone. Jordan Salinger from the Mayor's Office of Resiliency. Folks may have seen a New York Times story last week on this issue. The gist is that the 12 other grantees that Will mentioned, part of this overall federal grant, have started the process of looking to extend the deadline for spend down so that in any scenario there is additional time to deliver these critical projects across the country. As many of you know, the deadline currently is September 2022. The ask is to extend that to 2025. This is a conversation that we've been having over the last several months with these other grantees in California, Louisiana, a number of other states and municipalities. And interestingly, and particularly given the times, we've been able to build a bipartisan coalition, including folks in Iowa and North Dakota that are, also in a similar situation and have been having conversations with their delegations about extending. We're still in early days. This is a kind of a challenging legislative process, particularly given the current makeup. But it's in its early stages, and we're doing this as Trevor was alluding to, because we don't want to give any of these funds back. This is a critical project to the community, to the city writ large, and so to build in additional time, we felt that we needed to start asking for this extension.
Thank you, Jordan. I just want to ask one more question relating to that. If the extension is not granted, what steps are the city taking to accelerate this project? Is the city moving in a way to start construction and to move up this project in the event that the federal government says no?
I'll say that the city remains committed to this project. There will be tremendous challenges, exacerbated by the COVID delays in, if we weren't granted an extension, thus, the need and we're starting several years before 2022 in order to buy us as much time as possible, either with this administration or the next administration.
So it could be the same.
Could certainly be the same. I think we're kind of trying to make sure that we have as much flexibility as possible. But I think you're pointing out a challenging issue and one that we're kind of running a variety of different scenarios. But I think fundamentally the city is committed to this project and is willing to go through a different variety of different avenues to make sure that it gets delivered.
Yeah, and I think our teams are on the phone with OMB several times a week on this, and I think Trevor, to the question that you asked earlier about let's not just sit around and sort of wait for the crisis to be over and get back to work. I think we are actively looking for there are creative ways or bits of the work that we could do in the meantime. And then just to reiterate what Jordan said, the recognizing that New York City is obviously not the only city that is trying to implement these grant funds that have that September 2022 deadline. And again, there's flooding projects and flood prevention projects in Memphis, Tennessee, and mine in North Dakota, and there's folks all over the country that Jordan and OMB have been really instrumental in bringing together to sign a letter as a bipartisan coalition to advocate for the extension of that deadline. So we are certainly, being loud and being proactive on that, but at the same time, we are trying to figure out a way to get this work back started here. Because I think, unlike many of the projects that we're working on that are solely funded with city capital, the federal funding is an additional wrinkle and one that we need to take seriously. And obviously, we're still committed to it, like Jordan said.
I appreciate the fact that New York has joined that coalition. The other concern is that the current administration does not have the warm and fuzzy feeling about New York. But
Yes,
that being said, Val, I see your hand in both places, and then we're going to go to Kay after that. Val?
Yes, I guess my question is, what can the community do to advocate for this? Because I'm assuming that when you talk Lower Manhattan, that we're talking actually the Brooklyn Bridge to Montgomery Street, which includes the Smith Houses, which is a New York City housing authority with mainly, with the majority of low-income Black and Puerto Rican people, as well as the Rutgers houses, et cetera. So what is it that people can do to advocate for protection? Because I think a lot of times, I've read an article recently that talks about the fact that very often Black and Puerto Rican communities get left out of this and find themselves with a variety of environmental injustice issues. And so in terms of the Lower East Side, I don't want to see the Lower East Side dealing with environmental injustice issues. I think that as a multicultural community, we want to advocate for the people here in the Lower East Side, especially. I have family in Smith, and I want to know that they're protected. And I want to know what I can do, what they can do, what the various leaders down here can do of New York City Housing Authority, et cetera. What can we do to advocate for protection for the residents in this community, a multicultural community?
Right, it's a great question, Val, and I think you're so right that it's critically important that all up and down the coastline of New York City that folks are protected. And I think to your point, we all know that Smith Houses was a big part of securing these funds and their advocacy at the beginning. So we obviously can't let that go to waste. I think generally, and Jordan, you can jump in here after as well, of course. The funding deadline is imposed by Congress. So this is something that needs to be written into law by Congress, an extension. And Congresswoman Velasquez has been really invested in this, and we've been working really closely with her team, Evelyn and Dan, on making sure that they know what the specific request is, et cetera. And I think, we're still sort of, this letter just got sent last week requesting the extension from our coalition. And I think we're still working to figure out exactly what the timing is, because like Jordan alluded to, and like Trevor alluded to, I think the support of our local, state, and federal elected officials is not a question here for this project. It's the Republican-controlled Senate that is the challenge here. So I think the fact that we have it's a shame that we have to do this, but it's a good thing that the project does have, or that the grant funding program does have projects in states of both political slants. But Val, I think if you don't mind us taking your question back and thinking about what ways that we might be able to work with you all to lift those voices and make sure that that the need for this project continues to be heard. I think we'll get back to you on that, because I think we really appreciate that offer, and we know that it's important to folks there, and we obviously really want to see the project move forward as soon as we can.
Let me just say one other thing about that. I got on this board because my niece lived in Smith, and I got on the board because she had to walk across the bridge during the World Trade Center bombing. And I think that in terms of the trauma that those people in Smith have experienced, that needs to be brought up. The fact that they were traumatized by the whole World Trade Center thing, and now to find out that this is another something that can easily be traumatizing. And like you said, Smith was very much advocates for this. And so, yes, please bring it back. I'll be looking for it. I got your email. I'll email you. As they say, I will hunt you down.
You don't need to hunt me. You know where to find me, Val.
Hey, listen, I want to see my family and friends protected.
Yes. Thank you. We want to go to Kay, but we'll also want to mention, because of the scope of the project, and I think it needs to be really, it's an important thing, because obviously I'm part of a coalition that helped with the funding, but the project line goes all the way down to and ties into Montgomery Street, which affects Souvenir Garden to a certain extent, only because of the tie-in.
Right.
Lands in one, lands into the building I live in, all affordable buildings, and as Val mentioned, environmental justice issue. But there needs to be, you know, all of us in that area are impacted, and I'm curious to see what, when you take it back, what the folks who live in this area can do. On that note, I see Kay.
Was Jordan going to say something? Will had.
Sure, Jordan.
I think Will said it excellently before. I think the challenge, you know, we have a unified front here with our own congressional delegation. You know, there's always more pressure you can put on there, but I think they certainly know this is an issue and something that they're working on. You know, I think there are more foundational issues, you know, in finding, you know, whether this is something that could be part of the next stimulus package, you know, whether it would have to wait for a disaster supplemental bill in the fall. You know, and I think there are so many unknowns going into what is likely to be a fractious political season that, you know, we're just trying to navigate. This is a common sense issue, once again, that we have, you know, built this bipartisan coalition that we, you know, we are hoping that's enough to save the day. But, you know, we know that there are certain folks that don't see requests from New York in a pleasant light, and so, you know, we're doing all we can, but you know, there's going to be challenges, and, you know, I think to get to the core of Val's initial point, you know, this is a critical community for us, and, you know, we've certainly seen some of the disparate health impacts from COVID. We know, you know, we've seen it from climate change, and we know it's only going to get worse as this, you know, we continue to grapple against this significant issue. So it's going to be a challenge, but you know, I think we've kind of built a strong coalition at the moment, and, you know, grateful for the support here.
Okay, so thank you, and I think Val said most of what needed to be said, but I think, you know, we've known this is the administration that is currently in. There have been delays that were not caused by the Trump administration. I think that there are things that, you know, when you say that we're going to get the money, we're behind the project, I think you have to be very clear where those pots of money are coming from, because we know that everything here, like we're talking critical health infrastructure, this is a critical infrastructure issue that to protect people on the coastline. I'm wondering how things are going in Battery Park. Is there equity around the perimeter of Manhattan? How are we thinking about that? How are we doing this together? But I think I would not glibly say that we're going to go forward no matter what, because things are not, I guess I'm just saying that I think that you have to really pare shit down and start working as fast as you can to do the very basic mitigation that needs to happen to protect human life. At this point, I think that's where we're at. And I would like to see a realistic, straight up response. This community deserves it. As Val said, they've been through a lot of stuff, and they deserve a straight answer, a very straight answer, even if it's bad news, but just, this is what we're going to have to do, and tell us where the pots of money are coming from if they're not coming from here, or how does this whole project get reduced to something that works and protects people. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I'm just going to add to close it, because I see no more hands. Will, and I'm sure you're familiar with numbers, and I understand the political landscape, but ZIP 1002 has the highest COVID rates in all of Lower Manhattan, I believe, below 100th Street. There's no other community that's more impacted than ZIP 1002, which obviously the ESCR and the BMCR are borders of that, but if we could add that to the argument or add that to the advocacy, I think that would be helpful in terms of a health issue. I'm going to go to one question and then we're going to move on. And I see Wendy's hand. And well, let me do this first. Is there anyone else from the committee who has a question or who are board members? Wendy, and I'm going to ask you to be brief.
Is the Esker project also asking for a federal extension of its $335 million?
So the current coalition is only of the National Disaster Resilience grantees. So if you're familiar, the source of funding for the ESCR project is the Rebuild by Design. It's a separate set and a separate kind of cohort of awardees. So not currently. That said, there's certainly an assessment of what the overall impacts of COVID are going to be. So it's a kind of ongoing conversation. There are unknowns into the future, whether COVID will have an impact on supply chains, construction contracts. There's certainly a lot of unknowns, and so it's something that's being discussed. But to be specific, the only thing that we've advanced at this point is that coalition of the NDR group at the moment.
Can you add your email also to the chat, please?
Yep, happy to.
Do offline.
All right. Thank you, Jordan, and we'll just have one follow-up because this is BMCR related, and that is these are projects that are funded but obviously impacted for COVID. The Package 4 and the Brooklyn Bridge Esplanade project.
Right, so those Trevor, so between, because the Package 4 and the Brooklyn Bridge Esplanade are also have federal funds from the LMDC pot, we are, that is coming into the context of those discussions as well. I think, internally as we, continue to ask for guidance from OMB and from City Hall on what things are going to be looking like in the budget, which again, we'll know in a couple of weeks. We're continuing to prioritize what is, what has deadlines associated with it, what is resiliency related, et cetera. All of that said, the pause will continue on those projects until at least the beginning of fiscal year 21 in July. And we'll keep you as up to date as we possibly can. I'm sorry I can't offer any more. And I think, Kay, I think you make a really important point earlier. I want to be 100% clear with folks that, and I think, it's always great to come to these meetings because I think of the, for projects like BMCR, the folks who are on the call right now, you all are the biggest advocates for this project. And it's great for us to feel that energy and to continue even in times when there's a lot of other things happening in the world, to have that focus continuing to be on investing in this community and investing in resiliency in this neighborhood, in the people of this neighborhood. So I think we appreciate, I think, always having that energy, and I think Kay, there is we want to be as transparent, as open as we get through these, as we begin to have these difficult conversations. And I think, again, the budget coming up at the end of the month on the city front, as well as the ongoing potential for additional stimulus to state and local governments coming from the federal government, all that is going to be absolutely key in answering these questions. So, I do thank you for asking the question and reminding us that it's obviously important to be transparent and open here about where we're going. I just think, we're hoping that in the next couple of weeks, there will be additional clarity around budgets and resources. And, obviously we hope to get back to work as soon as possible on all of these projects citywide. But we are on pause right now and sort of, trying to figure out where we can squeeze a little bit more work out now before we get that budget news.
All right, thank you. Well, obviously we're going to have to probably have some more meetings on this because we're in danger of losing the projects themselves have been stalled for nearly a decade. Still I won't get into it, but we need to have some more conversations about this. But thank you for your updates, and we appreciate it. We will talk soon, and thank you, Jordan. I see your microphone somewhere here.
Thanks, Trevor.
And,
yeah, thank you for hosting us, and we're looking forward to getting back to work and having the most concrete answers that we can for you as soon as we can.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for making masks.
Yeah.
Good
One
progress.
crisis at a time.
All right, now we're going to move to the one of the remaining agenda items, and that is district needs statement. I did not get a chance to send the document that I was supposed to send to everyone, but I did send it to Michael. I don't know if we want to share that screen. Is Susan, are you on also?
Yeah, I'm on it, and I actually have it in front of me. And Anthony from Margaret's office is also here, and I think will also be able to help us. But I want to start by saying it's not as scary as it looks. All that stuff that's red, it just means that those are actually easy things, because those are questions that if we don't know the answer tonight, will be answered in our district level meeting with the Parks Department, and which I am trying to get in July before the July Parks Committee meeting. So, these are all things Jim went through and checked what needed to be updated. So do you want to start going through what's in the red to see if we have answers for some of these?
Sure.
Okay, so this Stanton Street building, we're still we're still trying to get that. The bathroom, is that complete?
Yes, the bathroom is complete. Apparently.
So who's taking notes on this?
Ryan, can I?
Yes, I'm taking notes.
I appreciate it. Sorry.
Ryan, do you have the document, or do you want me to send it to you?
I don't think she has the document, Michael.
Yeah, please send it to me.
Send it to me.
I have to stop sharing for a second, unless you all.
Sure. And Ryan, if you're not able to do it in Word with track with changes, you can also write it and then send it to me, and I can handle it. I didn't mean to make it this challenging, but a lot of stuff came in at the last minute for me. So I can handle it along with the resolution. As long as I have your notes, I can do most of the work.
Okay.
Ryan, that email or downtown art email?
Either one,
Which
Michael.
email?
They're both fine.
I just sent it.
Okay, Anthony, I'm going to ask you to jump in wherever we start talking about stuff. If you know answers that I don't, jump in, okay?
Okay, will do.
Well, let's back up a little. I just want her to grab for Ryan to grab the first comment that you made about the Stanton Street bathhouse, which the bathroom is complete.
The bathroom.
Sorry. They are complete.
Yes, they are complete.
Gotcha.
And I assume there's nothing new we can say about the Stanton building.
Same old, same old. Thank you.
Okay. Hester Street building use. That's actually really unclear because it doesn't say what we're really asking for. Does anyone know what we're really asking for in the Hester Street building?
We're asking for it to be returned, but if it's a root canal at this point, I would say nothing's going to happen with it. I just think return to the community is.
Yeah.
Well, it's being used by parks workers, right?
It's in the sentence above the bullets. The sentence above the bullet says, "We believe these buildings should be renovated and reopened for community use."
Good. That's fine. Yes, it's being used by park workers. Both floors. I think at one point Parks Department, I know at one point Parks Department was offering us to look at taking the top floor. So I just think we keep it in play. Nothing's going to happen.
Okay. I just think that we should add a few words to make that when people look just at that bullet, it's just more clear what we're asking for.
Return, return for community and park use, I think.
Okay. The Allen Street Mall Comfort Station, we should ask about, I'm sure nothing's happened, but we should certainly ask about that when we have the meeting with Parks.
Yep.
Seward Park, Park House meeting, building, has anything happened with that? Does anyone know? Oh, the bathrooms are open. The Park House needed renovation, but nothing's happened yet. Is that true? Or we'll leave that for to ask Parks during our meeting.
Just to jump in, that was the building that was supposed to be made available for our use, and Parks, I don't think, has done any of the repairs. I'd be happy to also share the repairs that we identified with the community board's office if you think that is helpful for your meetings with Parks.
No, I think what our meetings with them is really gonna, I think it's very robust, but thank you. LaGuardia House's playground building, that's the one it's now the open turf area, right?
Well, they haven't started the open turf. That was in fact, we need to follow up on that because the demo is complete, but I don't know the status of the turf.
Okay,
I don't think it's been done at all.
So that'll be for the meeting.
Correct.
Baruch House Bathhouse. I don't know what, I don't know the status of that at all.
They put out an RFP. I don't know. This was all pre-COVID, so I don't know.
It was a while ago.
Parks meeting.
Tompkins Square Park Building, there'll be a question for him for the Parks meeting. Stanton Street Park House.
Same.
We still want that, right? And there's no movement on it?
Yeah, no movement.
Nobody knows of any movement on that.
No movement.
LaGuardia Bathhouse. Is that on there twice? Oh no, that's a different one. So the bullet point here, the abandoned bathhouse, is that still true?
For LaGuardia?
Yeah.
It's demoed.
It's demolished.
Yes, they were supposed to replace it with a turf field. That's what we don't know the status because it was supposed to happen before COVID and then it disappeared.
So maybe what we need to do, the note for that bullet is check with Parks status of turf field. Does that sound correct?
Correct. I thought that was an earlier bullet.
Yeah.
I think there, some of it sounds like it's repetitive and I'm a little confused.
Susan, can I stop you for a second? Troy Velez has its hand up for a while. Troy, do you have a question about this?
You know, I have a question about the Baruch bathhouse. And the question is, it's slated, you guys have it slated here and it's it should be under RFP now. Do we know, Trevor?
They issued an RFP, but we haven't heard anything since COVID. So we're going to get an update on that.
Yeah,
okay.
We're having a meeting with Parks in July. And so all the things we don't know, we're going to put on the list for that meeting.
Okay, is the July meeting subject for anything to change with the status of it? Like it going back to the community as it was originally supposed to?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
I think he's at, hold on, somebody's reverberating.
There's something wrong with the sound.
I'm muted.
Troy has an echo on his system, but what I think I heard from him is that the July meeting, I think what he wants to know if we're going to get any more clarification on what's going on, especially the RFP. And as
So
Susan, if
the
you give a
July
brief explanation, right? Go ahead, Susan.
The July meeting is a separate meeting from the community, from the committee meeting. And yes, we will. It's a budget consultation that we're having with Parks Department. And yes, we will get answers. And the answers will go in this district needs statement. They'll be, I mean, and they will, we want to have them before the next Parks Committee meeting. Is that okay? Does that answer anything, everything?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I'm
so
sorry,
going-
Susan. I'm sorry, Susan. I have to jump off this call for a work, paid work thing. So could I just say the two things that I wanted to say before I leave? Is that the comfort station in SDR Park at Broome, I think we have to put that some of them are in need of renovation or repair, because that doesn't need to be renovated as far as I know. And the only other thing with the rats is the MTA ventilation system is going to wreak havoc on the side of that, of the SDR Park. So I'm sorry to have to leave, but thank you so much.
Okay, but yeah. Ryan has both those notes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll send them. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm assuming under comfort stations that you want to keep that first paragraph, that first little paragraph for the use of the community, that we need bathrooms.
Right.
The bullet under it, they're talking about which ones need renovation. Tompkins Square Park you can take out because that's funded. SDR Park at Broome we said was done. Correct or no? Does anyone know? Is Anthony still there? Does he know?
I believe Kay said earlier that it was.
No, she said they want the building back. Did she say anything about the bathroom?
Sorry, you're talking about the bathrooms in the Park House at Stanton Street?
At Broome Street.
Oh, okay.
So just leave the question there then.
Yeah.
So, you know, people, as we go through it, the committee should look and see if there's anything they want to take out, add to. I'm only looking at the comments that Jim made, but people should go, you know, the committee should comment on what, you know, whatever you see. I will tell you the statistics about rodents in park. I just copied them and sent them to Department of Health to ask if they could give us updates. Does anyone have any information about wireless access in any of the parks? Do you know anything about that, Anthony, about Wi-Fi in the parks? No?
No, there's, I mean, there was.
No.
Susan, I remember, I
Go ahead.
forget his name, but there was somebody who wanted to make a presentation at one of our meetings about, I think at the NYCHA meeting about, you know, the NYC mesh service or something like that, but that's not something.
Oh, that was a private thing, and that was NYCHA, it wasn't parks.
Yeah.
So Parks Department is doing public-private partnerships to get free Wi-Fi for everyone. So I guess we should still just ask what's new on that.
I would leave that in.
Okay, maintenance is going to be, I'm going to say it's going to be more of a priority than it's ever been forever.
Right, but I don't think any of the language changes, or because we're still asking for maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might have to make it a little, we might think about even making it stronger, that's all.
And Susan, this is, remind me, this is like more capital expenses, right? Not.
No, it's more an assessment of need. So this is an overall assessment of needs that's going to inform our budget priorities. Now in parks, because of the nature of parks, we mention specific projects. Generally in most committees, we don't say we want funding for this program, we want funding for that program. We talk about the need for like youth after school services. And then we do budget priorities for specific ones. So we're trying to frame everything in more general, broad needs of the community, and that will inform particular budget priorities. And for our capital priorities, most of the 40 are generally parks, but parks is going to have serious expense priorities this, for this coming cycle, for this coming year and the year after that also. And it's going to.
Sorry, would it be appropriate then to add something in here about, the need for additional recreation programming or whatever for the community that, lost programming for 4 months during the COVID shutdown, or would that not be something that fits?
So, yeah, so that's not really, so this, we should be aware, and I apologize, I should have said this in the beginning. This is for the fiscal year starting July 2021. So what we're looking at is what will those needs be then? And I think it's going to be very appropriate to say, we have different needs that are more, might be more severe because of COVID, or, and this might even have something to do with social distancing. I don't know if we'll still be talking about that then. But we're not looking at like, what are the problems today? We're looking at what we think the needs are going to be a year from this July. So it may be, and I suspect that there will be a lot less money for youth programs and that kind of thing, which I think is what you're alluding to, right?
Yes.
So, so we might want to make a note to put, like what has come out of COVID, and it might be needing more youth programs and space for youth might be one of those needs.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea to add something like that.
This is Anthony. Can I ask a question in regards to the for community gardens, the special purpose community garden district? Just for my curiosity here for the committee here, is this also something that's being considered within the CV3 land use as well, or this is just for parks and waterfront?
It's mostly in Carlina's area. It's something that was created several years ago.
Okay.
But it's mostly in East Village.
Okay. Okay. All right.
So you can be jealous.
Yeah.
Although he's got a good question as to whether that's a land use item, but we'll continue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does anyone have any issues as far as needs as far as gardens? The bioswales tree plantings, is that something that should be updated?
I think it may need updating. I know the tree planting program is supposedly back on. I don't know in what capacity. The budget, apparently they have the budget for it, but I think we probably need to look at this paragraph. I don't have any updates on it, but I think it should be noted that we need to update that.
Yeah. Anthony,
Susan, what about the Triangle Park on East Broadway? And
yeah, that's a budget priority, not the overall thing.
Okay.
That will be what we're following. So we can put in a question for that. What is the status of that? Because we've asked for it in the past.
So the question for the bullet point, Ryan asked, we would ask on the status of, what's the proper name of that triangle?
Okay, that's to put in a separate list for budget questions, right?
Correct.
Not for the district needs.
Correct.
I'm just putting it into the notes.
Yeah, no, that's good.
It's the Triangle Park by, it's called Green Street. It's called Green Street. And it's by Samuel Dickinson Plaza,
East Broadway and Montgomery. It takes those three.
Thank you, Josie. I'll get the proper name.
It's Green Street.
No, I think, are you talking about Ahern Park, the one by Apple Bank?
Well, it's across the street from Apple Bank. It's across the street from Henry Street Settlement, that little park in Henry Street Settlement.
That's Ahern Park. AHEARN. It's the triangle right in the back of Apple Bank, across the street from.
It's not next to, but it's really across the street from Apple Bank. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll identify it, but I know what you're talking about. I'll identify it.
Okay.
Okay, so Anthony, do you know anything about the tree planting project that's part of the mitigation?
No, I do not, but I can find that out for you.
Okay, no,
Susan,
don't.
Let me.
Susan, the task force the person who's running the task force sent out an email last week, basically stating that they're going to restart the whole process.
Okay, so don't ask Anthony. So we might want to update that section to say something about what we expect from the task force. Does that seem right?
Correct.
Waterfront should update. Well, I don't know where's Pier 42 going to be in July 2021?
I don't. It's a very good question, and we need to ask about it.
Great question.
Anthony, any news?
I'm gonna have to go back. I'm gonna have a conversation about with Marion about that. That is a great question. I'm not sure how that's gonna turn out, especially coming next year. We'll have to see. But I have it down, because that's something I'm kind of curious about too, going forward. Budget process.
Pier 35, does it still need more adequate staffing? Is that true, Trevor?
Oh yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
The whole section on the libraries, what I do, just let everyone know, is I send this back to the libraries every year. They update it and send it back, and then we just drop it in. So there's no work involved in that. And then there's a paragraph under the libraries. Oh, that's from the libraries also. So we shortened this a lot last year, and we do not want a long listing. We want it to be succinct and to have our priority needs, so that they really stand out. Is there anything that anyone thinks is missing from this?
I've already made my comment about the youth program, so I'm good.
Right. Is there anything else particularly, and it's something maybe people want to think about, that it has changed, or that we see inequities that have been made more visible because of COVID, anything of that sort? Maybe put in something about, what we've seen on the inequities, and maybe even something about the zip code of 10002.
Yeah, I just don't have the language for that right now, but I'd like to make a note that the racial inequities and health inequities in our zip, and we lead in COVID-19 deaths and percentage of infection-wise. So, but I don't have the language, so we can just make a note about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't think we're talking what we need language for, right? Jim, yeah. looks like Jim's still on, so I'm going to volunteer him to work with you on that.
Is he still on? Jim?
Yeah, his name's there. Are you there, Jim?
He just got up from the sofa. He's running over now. He's putting on his headphones.
He's muted. He's muted. Is he not? He can talk, but is he not listening to us?
He's probably is. But okay, I'll work with Jim on that.
Okay. So anyway, we can do that. So that's, I think that will add a lot of, I think that will add depth to it. I really do.
I don't have any more comments on this.
It's Gigi.
I don't have any comments on this either. I think we can move on.
All right,
So
so
that-
we have, go ahead, Susan.
I mean, that's the whole section.
Okay, so that concludes. And Susan, can you just let us know the next steps for this? I know we started a little early, which is good, but the next step for this, for district needs.
Okay, so to just go through the process, because I'm sure some new people are still around. To go through the process, we are going to be working on the district needs, hopefully finalize it in August, but we're not going to vote until October because there might be additional information or last minute data or something because of everything changing. We will, after we finish the district needs, each committee will be working on budget priorities, and we're going to be working on expense priorities. And we have about 25 for the whole board, and capital priorities, and it's about 40 for the whole board. So we always have a lot of room for to prioritize what we think is most necessary for parks. And our council people pay a lot of attention to it, at least in the past when they had money. So we will put this on the agenda again for next month, and hopefully we will have answers from the Parks Department on all the questions we listed for them. We will have new information from Parks Department to report to the committee. And we'll talk about, hopefully we'll have some new language drafted for sections that people can discuss. Does that all sound reasonable? Are there more questions?
Understood. Any questions on that?
Just one other thing I'll add. In September, we are required by city charter in September to have a public hearing and to hear from the community for the budget priorities, not for the district needs, but for the specific priorities we want the city to spend money on. And that is a totally separate thing than, what is that, the participatory budgeting that the council members do. This is totally separate and aside from that. Our budget is the agency budget money. What the council members do is take a pot of city council money and say to their constituents, how do you want this spent? Is that correct, Anthony?
That is correct.
Okay, any other questions?
No question, but I believe that participatory budgeting was canceled for this year due to COVID. Is that correct, Anthony?
Yes, that is correct as well.
I did not know
because it was
that.
actually, because we were supposed to have, actually we were really supposed to go into participatory budget training sessions in the week after the lockdown, because we had that scheduled for the last week of March. And because of, like Mike alluded to earlier, with COVID being in place, it was canceled.
A new world we live in.
People will start coming back to our meetings now.
All right, I don't think the parks manager is on.
No, I haven't seen his name.
Okay, so with that being said,
can I just ask, we didn't hear from Jim. I was gonna ask if he wanted to add anything, but I don't think he's listening, right? Okay, he's eating dinner.
I unmuted.
Jim's now on. Jim, hello.
I unmuted.
Yeah?
I don't know if he's paying attention now.
Mute him,
It's
mute
okay.
him. He's in the bathroom. He's in the bathroom. Mute that. Okay, thank you.
That's okay.
Susan, is it possible, since we don't have the park manager on, is it possible for the office to find out from parks whether or not events are going to be allowed after June 30th?
In the parks?
Yeah, they canceled.
Sure.
But there are some park groups that have permits for events after June 30th that haven't heard whether or not they're going to be allowed to do them.
Can you do me a favor and send me an email so I'll remember?
Got it.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night. Can I say good night?
You can say good night, but we're hold on, everybody. You got to take attendance at the end. So a motion to adjourn, and we're going to do a roll call. Ryan, if you want to do.
Good night, Susan.
Yeah.
All right. Good night,
Make a
you
motion
guys.
to adjourn. Val.
All in favor? Yes. Let's take attendance on that. Ryan, if you want to start with the
Trevor
names.
Holland,
Yes.
Kay Webster. Kay Webster.
Yes.
Oh, she got off. David Adams. Huron Altman. Carlin Chan.
Yes.
Ryan Gillum, yes. Valentina Jones.
Yes.
Michael Marino.
Yes.
Carolyn Ratcliffe.
Yes.
Robin Chattel. Josephine Velez.
Yes.
That being said, first I'm going to apologize. A very busy day for me, and everything came in at 5:59, and I was not able to get everything out. And we talked about some different procedures last night at exec, which is we're going to try and send the draft resolutions beforehand, but it has been a challenge to get stuff out when you get them last minute. So it didn't run the way I expected. I'm really apologizing to Ryan because I told her you're taking those 2 minutes before the meeting. Well, sorry about that. Just dump it all back on me and I'll find a way to get it complete. That being said, everyone, good night and be safe.
Good night. Take care.
Ryan.
Good night.